You might have noticed that my inventory just changed, and that's because every 10 seconds my hotbar gives me random items, along with 4 extra spots for everything I need to beat the game. So to start out, I already scrounged up some armor, and I decided to venture out to see if I could find a village, which eventually I did find. So I took a leap of faith. I meant to use my water bucket, but I failed. Anyway, and then I ended up getting a bucket of lava, and what I was trying to do is save up enough lava that way I can make a portal. Then I realized how much of a waste of time that was, so I took a gander around at my surroundings and I saw a portal, and so I threw my flint and steel out hoping that like it wouldn't disappear, but I guess it did. But it is absolutely no worries because I found flint and steel in the chest. And so very slowly but surely I started taking off the obsidian that I didn't need on the portal and getting lava buckets, using water to make more obsidian, and it was definitely a long process because I had to wait for a pickaxe, I had to wait for water, so it was just a big waiting game. And so finally, after a lot of waiting, I finally was able to get 2 more pieces of obsidian, and I was 1 away from getting a portal, and so I destroyed that, and then a little bit more waiting, and I finally got 1 more piece of obsidian, which allowed me to go into the nether. So when I finally got to the nether, my first goal was to either find a fortress or a bastion, and so I was like digging and digging and digging, and eventually I actually ran right into the fortress, which was quite lucky on my end, and so I started bridging over to the fortress. I made my way up and into the fortress, and I was very quickly greeted by these skeletons, so I did what anyone would do and I ran, and I also just as quickly found the spawner. So I did what I do best, and I hid because I was scared and I still died, but fear not because I made my way back to the fortress stronger than ever, boom, boom, and so I went back to the spawner and I was ready to fight. I was prepared. I was here, and they kind of kicked my ass. I can't even lie. They're pretty hot and fiery and all the bad things. And because of the random inventory, I had no weapons, and I was stuck in there with them because I was stupid enough to trap myself in there with them, and so I did die. But as I do, I jumped right back into battle, boom, 2v1, but I ran, obviously, because they were, 3v1 now. And I learned the first few times. I became smarter. I became more strategic. Despite all the running, I soon acquired projectiles. So I threw my trident and then I ran, of course, because, I didn't have it. And, there were too many blazes to keep up with. They were, spawning in and out, in and out, in and out. But thank God that is no match for me, a resilient person. Boom, 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 throwing punches, hitting, kicking, throwing eggs, anything I could do to get these blaze rods. And you would think all the very sturdy, maces and, stuff that I'm getting would help, but it didn't because I died again, and so I'm back in the fortress, getting killed, trying to kill these blaze rods while they're throwing their fireballs at me. But again, I'm getting better, and I'm getting smarter, I'm getting more strategic. Or at least I thought so. I think the only thing that matters is that I'm getting these blaze rods, and you know what? A win is a win. A win is a win. So I charged back into battle, and I charged right back out, charged right back in, and, I was feeling stronger. I was, powerful now. And so after a very long time of this, I finally had enough blaze rods, and so I made my way to a bastion and found some pretty decent stuff, but it wasn't gonna help anyway because my inventory keeps disappearing. So. But the gold helmet is in fact going to help because now piglins will not kill me, so that is great for me. And so eventually I did find this little room. I snuck past some of the serious guys, and I found some of the unserious guys, and this was an even longer waiting game because I had to wait for gold, and so I just decided to start decorating a little bit, while I had some spare time. While I was standing here, the serious guys saw me a little bit, and so I finally got some gold, and I was finally able to trade some, and I was able to get 9 whole ender pearls. And then I just went back to decorating because I had to wait even longer, and then the wait finally was worth it because I got more gold. I threw it out, and they didn't even want it. And so after 30 minutes of waiting for gold, I decided to take a look around, and I was very quickly greeted by all the mobs, gas, piglins, just all of it, all the good stuff. And so I did find a much safer corner to exist in, and eventually I did get some more gold, and I found some extra piglins to trade with, and they didn't really give me anything good, so I decided to look around a little bit, see what was here, see if I could find any chests with anything that could remotely be useful in any way. And so eventually I did get bored, and I decided to go get ender pearls the old-fashioned way, and You know, it wasn't the worst thing, but it was definitely a challenge because these Endermen are just, they're a pain in the ass. You know, they want to play games, they want to play Ring Around a Rosie, you know, back and forth, you know, over and over again, you know, one hit every once in a while. And after a few minutes of playing games with this bastard, I was finally able to kill it, and it didn't even give me a pearl. So eventually I found more to harass, and, you know, still didn't give me a pearl, actually. I don't even know where this Enderman went. You know, I saw it, and then it was just gone. So eventually I just went deeper into the biome, and I was able to find some more, and so eventually I finally did get some ender pearls. You know, it was definitely a task and a half to do, but you know, I made it work, because that's what you gotta do. And then my Enderman exploded after I killed it. I'm not sure why that happened. So then I went back to scrapping with these Endermen, and they were finally giving me more pearls. Because, you know, I would never consider myself a lucky feller, but, you know, one ender pearl every 20 Endermen is just a little inconvenient sometimes. And after ages and ages and ages, I finally had enough, and I had 12 ender eyes, and so I made my way right to that portal. Eventually I found, you know, a spot, and so I dug down, and then I dug right into the portal room. Or not the portal room, but like the stronghold. I ended up having a little tussle with a skeleton, and then while I looked around a little more, I found a pearl, some bread, and then I came across lava, and I went right into the portal room, which thank God. And I was very kindly greeted by these silverfish. You know, they're so very nice. So I just threw a potion on them, and, you know, problem solved. But because of the spawner, I still had a few more that I had to deal with, and so while I was trying to break the spawner, I kept getting hit. And so, you know, I quickly set my spawn point as well, because, you know, that's pretty important. But I just stacked up, and then I was finally able to reach the spawner, which, you know, go me. So after dealing with a few more silverfish, I was finally able to light the portal and walk in. So when I reached the end, I got straight to business, and, you know, I went right up the pillar, you know, got the first one, you know, made a jump. That was quite stupid. But, you know, then I got the second one, had quite a tumble, but I saved it. So then I equipped my bow, because, you know, I figured it'd make my life a lot easier, and I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I guess things were going too well, because, you know, I was getting hit with the purple stuff. I almost fell, and I had a staircase all the way down because I no longer had a water bucket. And so after very carefully doing so, I got impatient, and I tried using my gravel to look cool, and then I died. But I got right back into battle, so no worries. I knocked out the rest of the end crystals and went straight for the dragon. I was making some pretty good hits, and I actually dealt a good number of damage with this bow, and so I made a leap of faith, and I landed it! And I'd gotten some TNT, so I quickly ran to the middle and placed it everywhere. That way, when I got flint and steel, I could just explode the dragon, you know? Solid plan, I must say. And so I got a few more good hits on it when it perched in the middle, and because Luck is my middle name, the dragon stayed there for quite a while, you know, boom, 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 and I think eventually I got it to about half health before it even, like, decided to go away. You know, I wasn't getting hit by anything, I wasn't flying anywhere, I was planted right on that ground, hitting that ender dragon as hard as I could, you know, ate an apple, and continued hitting the dragon, boom, 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 boom. And eventually I got too ahead of myself, because as I was hitting and swinging, it flew away, and it flung me 500 feet in the air, and I had nothing to save myself. But I got back to the end, and, you know, I got right back into battle, you know, boom, boom, bam, and, you know, it was throwing its fireballs at me, but I'm too good, and I dodged them, as I do, and, you know, I'm back to hitting the dragon, you know, bam, 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 you know, the TNT is right there waiting to be lit, hit me in the air again. I didn't clutch it, but I didn't die. Eventually I got more TNT, so I started placing it, like, around more, and I got a trident, I threw it, I missed, no shock, but, you know, no match for me. At this point, my inventory sucked. I barely had any resources, so I was just hitting it with what I could, and, you know, I was still getting damage to the dragon. Boom, 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 and it hit me, and I clutched it. No, I didn't. But fear not, because I didn't die. I can't die, and I won't die. So I went back to hitting the dragon with my bow. Boom. And eventually I finally got flint and steel, and I was hoping that could be the end of it. You know, all I had to do was wait for the dragon to perch. You know, it flung me, but I lit the TNT, it exploded, and it got the dragon to just a few hearts, and eventually I was able to finally kill it because I got more TNT. I lit it, and boom!